Livestock truck rollover events.
I am Jamee Eggers, and for a little over 20 years, I've been helping food production companies and livestock producers with all kinds of topics, all kinds of things. But lately, I've been specializing my work in the animal welfare space. So doing a lot of welfare auditing for companies, creating some animal welfare certification programs, and then doing one of my favorite things, which is livestock truck rollover training for a variety of different stakeholders.
Rollovers versus other traffic events.
I would tell you there's three big differences between a normal traffic accident and a traffic accident that involves livestock trucks or livestock in general. The first is that they have really long clearance times. So all of the responders are going to be on scene for a long period of time. This can be 4 to 6 to 8, sometimes 10 hours, mostly because we have to deal with the livestock in the moment. It's not like a truck that's hauling refrigerators. If it rolls over, we can kind of drag it to the side of the road and then go do full recovery on that when there is less traffic on the road at 2 a.m, for example. So this, we have to deal with them in the moment. And the biggest risk with those long clearance times is that it significantly increases the risk of a secondary crash. And so these are the looky-loos that are driving by along the road and see they're filming the accident from their car and not paying attention. So then they run into the person in front of them. And those secondary crashes also take resources away from dealing with the livestock and the truck and the driver. I think the second biggest difference is that it brings a lot of people to the scene that maybe don't have emergency management experience. So we're used to police and fire and ambulance and emergency responders being there, but we also need people to come to the scene to help with the actual animals. So those are people that are not necessarily experienced with emergency situations, and it just brings a lot of other people and resources to the scene. And then the last one, which can be frustrating for emergency planners and people that like to make a plan written on paper, is that because of the livestock component to them, they are full of "it depends." You can't really do a very nice, every time there's a livestock truck rollover, you're going to do these 6 things in a row every time. The animals just bring this component of, I've never seen that before, that makes you have to be really adaptable and adjustable.
Stakeholders in a livestock rollover.
So like I said before, one of the biggest differences is that between a livestock truck rollover and a typical traffic accident is the number of people that are required to respond. So when I give this rollover training, including emergency management people and producers, everyone usually is shocked to see the number of different types of responders that you might have. So the first few are kind of obvious. So you've got the fire department, you have emergency medical services like the ambulance and others like that, EMTs, paramedics, and then police. Those are pretty common, but then you're going to have kind of this other livestock producer group. So those might be veterinarians. Hopefully you can get a veterinarian at the scene if you need one. But they might be, these livestock experienced people might be producers in the area. They might be, if it's close to a processing facility, it might be staff from animal handling staff from the packing plant or the processing facility. It might be emergency management might have contact lists for just local regional producers that they know would have equipment and experience. It might be experienced animal handlers from here where we're sitting in Ames, so it might be from Iowa State, that type of thing. Then you also have these auxiliary people that help. So you're going to have towing and recovery that's going to help with stabilizing the vehicles and recovering all of that part of it. Then you're going to have emergency managers. They're probably not going to be at the scene themselves, but they will be interacting with all of the emergency personnel on finding resources. They might be helping find equipment. You're probably going to have some type of Department of Transportation. So DOT is likely to respond with large equipment. And then you might also be communicating with them about traffic camera placement and recording of the scene or lane closures. They might be providing equipment for that. And then everybody's going to be interacting with dispatch. Again, they're not going to be on the scene, but they're going to be communicating all of these different groups that would respond to a livestock truck rollover.
Producer involvement.
So in addition to being able to help physically with setting up handling equipment and actually handling the livestock at the scene, producers can play a really helpful role to law enforcement or to the other agencies that are in charge. One of the biggest questions that law enforcement usually has at the scene is determining who owns the animals in the trailer. So they obviously know how to check the cab for a bill of lading, but beyond that, they might not really know how to keep asking the questions to determine who owns the animals in the trailer or that were involved in the accident, and how to contact the insurance company that would be involved in those decisions, and to get more information about that. So I think that aside from helping with the physical part of the livestock, producers can really help the law enforcement and people in charge at the scene understand how all the ways that those contracts and bills of lading are written, and how to help them really figure out to get to the root of who owns the animals on the trailer.
What are the first things that happen in a rollover event?
The question of who is in charge at the scene and what happens right away when the livestock truck rolls over is a really important one to cover. So you're going to have the typical emergency responders that you're going to see at the scene. So police, fire, maybe you're going to have an ambulance and other kind of emergency medical personnel that might be on the scene, depending upon if there's injuries to the driver or to the other drivers in the accident. And so they're the ones that are in charge. And it's important to remember that human safety is always number one. Of course, we care about the animals, but human safety is always the first priority at the scene. So those emergency responders that we would expect to be at a traffic accident are going to be the ones that are in charge. And it might vary just a teeny bit based on where you are, if fire is officially in charge or if police are officially in charge, but one of the two of them is going to be the one in charge at the scene, called the commanding officer, or a commanding agency. And those people, their goal is primarily human safety, like I said, and then managing the traffic around the accident and responding to that. And then as those initial emergency response and human safety aspects are established, then they're going to start to call for additional resources like livestock producers or people like animal control or folks that have experience with the livestock to help them deal with the animals on the scene and what we're going to do with the trailer.
What to know if you get called to the scene.
So for livestock producers or people that are familiar with how livestock behavior, or they may have some experience with livestock, if you get called, if the emergency manager, for example, calls you to help assist with a rollover, or if it's in your neighborhood and you happen to be driving by and you're like, oh, I know cattle, I can help with this, or I know who has a set of panels, for example, that we could call to do that. There's a couple of really important pieces that you need to know. The first is the safety aspect. Like I said, human safety is really, really important. So if you're going to be there to assist, make sure that you have some high-vis safety gear, so the really bright yellow or bright green with reflective tape. Safety gear at the scene is really, really important. So if you don't happen to have any in the vehicle that you're driving, maybe ask some of the other emergency responders that are there for some of that. Make sure that you put that on right away. And then secondly is it might be through dispatch. So whoever calls you to come, or if you're driving by, make sure that you check in with law enforcement or the commanding officer to know the appropriate place to park at the scene. It might seem like it makes a ton of sense for you to pull up over here, but the way that the emergency folks have set up the scene, you might actually be causing another traffic accident. You might think you're parking in this spot because it's away from the animals, but that might actually create what's called the funnel of death. So if there's lane closures, it might be difficult if you park in the wrong spot, for people to understand exactly where they're supposed to go in the lane closure, and then that causes another secondary accident, and the risk of fatalities in those secondary accidents is really, really high. So safety gear, and then make sure that you ask the people on the scene where to park.
Iowa's Good Samaritan Law.
So in addition to those safety considerations that I just talked about, high-vis safety gear and knowing where to park at the scene, the other consideration for livestock experienced people to think about if they're asked to go to a rollover, or if they come upon one and are willing to help, is Iowa's Good Samaritan Law. So this is a liability protection, a legal protection that helps people responding to accidents like that if something else were to happen. So if a piece of equipment broke and somebody else was injured at the scene, or hopefully not, but somebody died as a result of something that happened in the response that you were a part of, Iowa's Good Samaritan Law is going to protect those responders from additional litigation and other suits. Now, I can't tell you that that's 100% perfect, that you're 1,000% protected, you don't ever have to think about it, because that isn't necessarily the case, as you would expect with other legal challenges. But there is some protection there. And then the other way that you can really guarantee that you volunteering services as a producer that understands livestock in an event like that is to those two key points that I listed earlier: the high-vis safety gear, the knowing where the right place to park at the scene, and really paying attention to what emergency responders are telling you to do and how to interact at the scene. But it shouldn't be used to, the Good Samaritan Law shouldn't really be used to completely discourage livestock friendly or livestock experienced folks from responding and helping out their community and fellow producers. It just know that that is a protection that is provided, but isn't necessarily perfect. And then oftentimes I get asked by producers or veterinarians, for example, if I get called to ask, and these aren't my cattle, for example, and they use my equipment and something gets broken, who pays for the repairs of my skid steer, or who pays for my bent up cattle panels that I brought, or something like that, or who pays for my time? And the answer to that question is not really very straightforward. Sometimes you can get, sometimes towing and recovery can help with reimbursements for broken equipment through the way they bill insurance companies. Sometimes emergency management has some insurance and payment options for those types of things. So I can't give you a super solid answer that yes, you will get that bill covered immediately and exactly at the cost, but there are some ways at the end of that to work through that.